Welcome to Life in the Pit, a podcast about the lives and adventures of instrumentalists within the wonderful world of musical theater. And now, here is your host, David Lane.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to Life in the Pit one more time in 2021. It is the last day of the year, so Happy New Year 2022. I would say I hope you had a good 2021. But I don't think anybody had a great 2021. I think one thing we can say, and this is something I've tried to really embrace for myself the past few years, is to recognize that every year has good moments, every year has bad moments. And one of the things that I've tried to do is to come up with, top 10 list. So I've done this for years with like my favorite books that I've read and sometimes favorite albums and favorite movies and so forth. But 10 moments that really stood out as good memories, because sometimes those get overshadowed, especially in years like 2021 and 2020. So I just want to throw that out as some encouragement and genuinely hope that everybody has a great 2022. So if you listen to the previous podcast, I said at the very end that I thought that might be the last podcast of 2021, and it was certainly the intent. And I was going to try to get going in 2022 as soon as I can, although I've got some things starting the year that might make it a little tricky. But I know at some point in January, I hope to have one, maybe two new episodes for you. But I wanted to come on because I have been brainstorming during this time off. It's been a couple of months since the last episode. And I wanted to just come on with an end-of-year episode to talk a little bit about some ideas going forward. So this won't be a long episode. And in fact, I was debating whether or not to even include the opening music because it's not really a regular episode. And it may be one of the shortest ones that I've put out there, but I did wanted to talk about this. So just kind of a recap. The first episode came out at the end of June 2020, and with the regular episodes and bonus episodes, I know that we're somewhere around 70 episodes now, including 61 regular numbered episodes, 60 of which include guests. And we have just about covered everything that I originally intended for this podcast. So I wanted to talk to keyboardists who play in the pit, as well as guitarists, bassists, drummers, auxiliary percussion. Wanted to talk to at least one of every reed, including multiple reed players. I wanted to talk to at least one of every type of brass instrument, including multiple brass players. And wanted to talk to violinists, violists, cellists, and bassists. I think I said bassists already. And all of that has been done. And I wanted to talk to people who play in Broadway. We've done that. Wanted to talk to people who've been on tours. We've done that. And people in community theater, I think we've done that in every time zone in the U.S. Wanted to talk to someone out of the country. We've talked to people in Australia and in Ireland. So this show has done, and we've talked to school teachers, those who've been in schools, and really I'm just trying to think of types of theater left to do. We've covered a lot of it. Now, the reason why I would keep the podcast going in this exact same format is because I haven't talked to everyone who's willing to come on this podcast. And there are still stories out there. So while I may not be able to get a unique perspective from traditional theater pit, there are still stories out there that you who have played in a pit have, that nobody else has. And I want to continue seeking out those experiences, those stories, because I think every guest who comes on here, even if it's the seventh or eighth person who plays those instruments, still has a story that's unique compared to all of the others. So the first thing I want to say is that Life in the Pit will remain centered around the pit. However, And if you saw my Instagram story a few days ago, this isn't exactly news, but even if you did see the story, I want to elaborate on it. What excites me going forward about Life in the Pit is the possibility of having traditional episodes that we've had before that are centered around musical theater, those who play in the pit, and branching off to include some other types of guests. So I'll talk about why I justify this. First of all, if you've noticed, there aren't many guests that have come on the show that have said that playing in the pit for the show that they're doing is all that they do. When that happens, it's almost exclusively those who are touring on union shows, because the Broadway touring shows will pay enough that if you wanted to, you could earn a living wage from that. Even those who play on Broadway have all of these side gigs that they're doing. And plus, one of the things that the pandemic has shown us, and this may be my number one reason for all of this, is that you have to have plan Bs, plan Cs. You have to have some diversity if you're going to succeed as a professional musician. So one of the things that I've thought of since the very beginning is who is the audience for this show? And I know some of you are just really interested in the concept of theater musicians. I think a lot of my audience, a good percentage, consists of people who are pit musicians. And I know for a fact that several of you are aspiring professional musicians. You are students, or maybe you're just getting started. And this show is all about how can I serve the interests of you. So for those who want to know about pit musicians and what they experience, it's important to me that we continue to include those guests on the show. You know, sometimes we have gone into those who play for opera and for ballets, and that's a very similar type of experience. So I want to not be reluctant to have those types of stories. We're going to get those types of stories on board. But I also thought about some other things that relate to the pit. And one last point I want to make is, as I said in episode 1, the pit is a literal place in the theater, if your theater is so equipped with one. But the pit is also metaphorical. And I want to take that metaphor a little further. So the metaphor, as I understand the pit when we're talking about theater, is that it is the place where the musicians are for a show. They could be on stage, could be on a platform, could be in the lobby. I've done that before. And where they are, that is the pit. But I think the pit, in terms of this mindset of a musician, is also going to refer to where musicians can go to earn a living, or to help kind of the portfolio that they need to earn a living. And I am going to stay away from the more traditional lines of employment. So I'm not going to be talking to those who play in a symphony orchestra, classical music, that's their regular job. I'm also not going to be talking to musicians who are in kind of what I call a mainstream rock band. So playing guitars, playing bass, drums, or lead vocals, and touring and making albums. There are so many podcasts, so many books, so many outlets that they are represented. So in addition to theater musicians that I've been having on the show before, I am going to be talking to, or at least seeking to talk to, people who, for example, are not in a rock band but have recorded for their albums. Every time you listen to an album, there are string players, there are brass players, there are additional musicians, and so I want to talk to them about just the studio experience. Something, of course, I'm very interested in, and this is just an aside real quick. Sorry, this is not scripted, so I may ramble a little bit, but I myself am someone who has kind of a lot of different hats that I wear. So this interests me greatly as a host, to just know these different avenues that someone who partly identifies as a pit musician can also be a full-time musician and still earn a living. So one of the things that greatly fascinates me, that you'll know if you've been listening, is film music. And there are so many podcasts that talk to the composers, but not too many that talk to the performers, those who have to sight read that music and play in sessions. So I'm going to reach out and see if I can get at least one or two people on the show to talk about that whole process. And that's going to be one of my 2022 goals. I do not have a guest lined up, but definitely going to be seeking. Another type of guests, music copyists. People who have to notate the music for these, whether it's for Broadway, whether it's for films, and there's a special art to that. So people who use Finale and Sibelius, I want to talk to one of those in 2022. A guest I do have lined up, and I don't know if it'll be in January or February when we get them on, but a great percentage of the guests I've have on here make part of their money by being a private teacher. And I'm going to be talking to a guest that's going to speak to private teachers about how to improve and streamline their business so that they're not spending time chasing invoices, not trying to get money from the parents, and not trying to be bogged down on the business side of things. So that's going to be a great episode, and that will be early in 2022. I also thought it would be a good idea to reach out to one or two people I know that are experts on finance and come in and talk about what musicians can do to improve their financial situation. So I hope that this doesn't turn you off and go, it sounds like, well, Life in the Pit's just becoming a general music podcast. No, we're still centered around the pit. But I think that the podcast up to this point has said what it needs to say, and now there's more that I think that it can say. It can talk to these musicians and those who want to become like these musicians and talk about the different things that we can do. And also, I don't want to completely neglect theater. I'm going to talk to at least a couple of theater performers who aren't in the pit, but can offer perspective with working with musicians and also touring and so forth. So I do have some guests lined up. I have some guests that I want to get to fulfill some of these niches. But I'm personally very excited, and maybe the most excited I've been in a few months, about the future of this podcast. And if there are topics that you want me to address that are even peripherally related to kind of non-traditional outlets for musicians, send me a message, and you'll hear all of that on the outro in just a moment. But reach out to me through any of the social media platforms where we are, or through the website, and just let me know what you'd like to hear. And again, I hope we're not losing you if we branch out. I try to make sure that we don't go more than, I would say, 3 episodes in a row, 2 if possible, without a traditional theater musician, that we've had before. But there are plenty of past episodes I would encourage you to revisit. A lot of gems there. So at any rate, that is what Life in the Pit will be going forward. And I look forward to sharing that with you, at least hopefully a couple of episodes per month. Going to continue shooting for every other Friday. The next episode, I'm not sure when it'll be out, but hopefully in one of the first 2 weeks of 2022. As a reminder, if you want to follow what's coming up next, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook at Life in the Pit Pod. You can follow me on Instagram at David Lane Music, or Twitter and Facebook at David M. Lane Music. As always, a special thanks to Mark Parolo for his cover art and to Bill Cisna for providing the introduction to this podcast. The theme music is composed and performed by David Lane. You can find out more about the podcast, leave feedback, or leave a donation at lifeinthepitpod.com. Please rate and review on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening.